Everybody, welcome to the Unraveler Show with your host, Alan Bondar, and my great friend joining me now, Nigel Taylor, all the way from Australia, but specifically where?
Adelaide, South Australia, in the beautiful Adelaide Hills.
Amazing. So right now, as we're talking, we are like almost on the exact opposite side of the time.
We are.
You're sleeping and I'm awake, or I'm awake and you're sleeping.
Yes,
very close to bedtime for one of us.
Well, yeah, that's all right. I'm full of caffeine, so I'm good.
Excellent. Well, today I'm extremely actually. You're one of my. I'm very much anticipating this interview, and here's why. So, as you know, I wrote a book called "How to Kill God the Easy Way," right? And you have that. You're reading that. That book probably would have helped you years ago, because here's why. So my book's about how to escape the grip of Christianity, escape the mind virus of Christianity in a way that doesn't require white knuckling through it, but just removes the brainwashing. And when you're done, you're done. You got out through the method I would like to call "How to Kill God the Hard Way."
I tell you what, it has been a wild ride.
Yeah. So from what I understand, brief interaction we've had is you almost remind me of, because I talk in my book about how Christianity is an addiction, much like smoking or whatever other addiction you may have. And you remind me of the type of addict that is trying to white knuckle their way out, and they just keep coming back for more abuse because they can't shake the feeling that something's off, and they got to come back and have it some more. And eventually you fought through it enough that like you may or may not still have those shakes. I don't know, but
no, they are gone.
They're gone now. Okay, finally, that's great.
They are gone.
You went back and forth. It's almost like the he loves me not syndrome. So I'm excited to hear, going back to the first time when you started to see what you saw that got you already getting out, but then you came back, and then you out, and then you came back. Tell us all of it, man. Tell us your reasons, because this is something that I think a lot of Christians are going to struggle with, especially the ones who don't read the book and get out that easy way. They're going to face what you're going to face. And so I want them to see, do we really want to go Nigel's way? It's a little painful. You can get out a lot easier. But anyway, so tell us your story, Nigel. I'm excited to hear this. And also, let's start with why you were a Christian to begin with. Give us your story.
Right. I mean, how long have we got?
I don't have a time cap. Hour and a half max if possible, but we can limit. We can whatever.
Okay, I'll sort of go back to the beginning. My mother joined the Seventh-day Adventist Church when I was 10 years old, back in 1966, and until then, our household, it was not Christian. My parents were pretty much atheist, agnostic, whatever. Never talked about God, let alone Jesus or anything like that. So my mother joined the Seventh-day Adventist Church because us kids went along, but not my father. He wouldn't have a bar of it. And anyway, my mother stayed on for 2 years and has never darkened the door of a church again except for weddings and funerals. But I stayed on. So anyway, I remember this as a 10-year-old. There was an active like children's ministry in the particular church we were going to, and we would go out on sort of hikes, moonlight hikes, or camping weekends. And I remember as a 10-year-old, I asked one of the leaders a question about God, and he told me off, and he said it's sinful to ask those sorts of questions, and that set the pattern for the rest of my Christian life, because I discovered it is sinful to ask certain questions. Like if you notice certain things in the scriptures, and no, you're not allowed to notice that. You're not allowed to bring it up.
Yeah.
So
I'm sorry, and I'll interject periodically as I hear you say.
Yeah, fine.
So I think a number of Christians, especially those who end up in the long journey that you and I have gone through, through preterism, whatever, you'll get there. But we're the type that asks questions. It's not often you hear the explicit statement, it's sinful to ask questions. Like, we get the pressure that you can't ask questions. You get the runaround. You get that you shouldn't ask questions like that because it's just going to deter your faith. But to hear it specifically stated like that, that's intense.
That was said to me. Back before that, in my earlier childhood, my father was what you call, he was in the federal police, which is a different name back then. And he was an undercover detective. We had no idea what he was doing, only found out years later. But one of the things he drummed into me as a young child was, don't believe everything you read, you hear, or you see. He said, always he said question everything, always ask questions. Well, as a child, I was already a very, very deep thinker anyway. And I was kind of hardwired that way, but I never forget what he told me. Is he said, don't necessarily believe everything you read, you hear, or you see. Question everything. And I always have. I seem to have a knack for noticing things. So when I read the scriptures, I kind of notice things. And all that yucky stuff in the Old Testament, well, I noticed it. And you think, well, what do you do with that, But anyway, I'm going to go all over the place here because there's there's so many different chapters to my life. So then as a 14-year-old in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, we were at a Bible study, and it was Matthew 24, the Olivet Discourse. And I remember we going through it and all the signs preceding the Lord's coming. And we got down to, and this generation won't pass away, blah, blah, blah. And of course, it was explained to us that meant the generation alive at the time, yet future. But I was a 14-year-old, and I noticed that I thought Jesus is talking to his disciples about the generation that they were in. And I just noticed it. And I thought, and of course, then over the years, I noticed more and more all those time text, audience relevance, etc. And it really disturbed me. I thought, how does that work? Like, if it's yet future, yet, like Matthew 10, when Jesus said to his disciples, you're not finished going to the cities of Israel till the Son of Man comes. Well, how does that work if it's yet future, So it was all those things. So that was already there, sort of noticing those things. When was it, 1981, I came out of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. This great big controversy erupted within the church. And so I decided to read the scriptures for myself apart from Seventh-day Adventist interpretation. And I was blown away because I saw clearly that the New Testament contradicted what the Seventh-day Adventist Church was teaching. And so I had this decision to make. Was I going to stick with how they interpret the scriptures, or was I going to let the scriptures speak for themselves? So I decided to let the scriptures speak for themselves. Well, that set the course for the rest of my Christian life. I became a diligent student of the scriptures. I had to know the scriptures inside out, back to front, to the point I had to understand the Bible itself, how we got it, how it was all the different components of it, how we got it. And years later, I got interested in sort of textual criticism, all the manuscript stuff. And when I got to that point, I thought, man, it is really messy. This was years later. It is really messy. Like, the Bible wasn't downloaded to us from heaven. I mean, it's messy,
Yeah.
And I'm sort of all over the place here. So it's sort of, I've sort of skipped about, decades now talking about that. My journey through Christianity, so it was the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Anyway, I got married very young. I became a father when I was 16. So my girlfriend, she was born and bred Seventh-day Adventist. So we got married very young, and we had 6 children together, all up. And anyway, just going way ahead here, that marriage ended in 1989, and that's an episode of itself. That's a very dark period of my life, and it wasn't just as easy as a marriage breaking up, but it turned out the family law court awarded me full legal custody of my children, gave her limited access under supervision. So that's another episode of my life. But So come out of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, we were floating around for a while, got into the Independent Baptist Church for a while, and they were ultra legalistic, so I didn't stay there for too long. And we landed in the Assembly of God. And I became heavily involved in that. I went to Bible college there in the early 80s. Just did part-time Bible college because I was working. And it was there in the hermeneutics class that I remember the things that they taught us, and it was always not just the context is king, but this thing about audience relevance, who was being addressed. But then on Sunday mornings in church, I would notice that they were breaking all those rules of hermeneutics that they'd been teaching us in the Bible college.
Yeah, dude, I totally know where you're coming from. I found the exact same thing. They teach the method, but they don't follow the method.
No. And I thought, what is this? Anyway, but during that period too, because being a Pentecostal church, and mind you, where we are here in Adelaide, South Australia, it was the biggest church of any denomination in the whole of Australia. I mean, we were it. All the hotshot preachers from overseas, would come to our church. So I went to a lot of healing services, and up on the pulpit, they're saying, "Oh, there's all healings taking place up here. There's hearing aids popping out. There's this and that," and I'm sitting there thinking, "Bullshit. There's nothing going on. Absolutely nothing." Anyway, I went to so many healing services. They had the great big names come in from America and all places like that. And all these reports were going overseas. There's a real move of God in Adelaide, South Australia. And there was nothing. I mean, absolutely nothing going on.
Now, can you just pause there? Because I'm certain listeners will be just as curious as I am to get a little bit more in depth about that. Because when you say nothing going on, what do you mean by nothing?
Except for people being slain in the spirit.
Okay.
And talking and speaking in tongues. There was no healings taking place. Like, there were people that were regulars who were going up for healing. They'd go up with their walking frames. And there was one man, he was horribly deformed. He was like in this big wheelchair, high chair. And all he did all the time was, that's all the noises he could make. And these people would go up week after week, or when there was big healing services, and they'd get help down, back off the stage, back on with the walking frame. And this man came back down, still going, and there was nothing. People were being healed of toothaches, backaches, and had a sore shoulder, and all just that psychosomatic sort of healings and that. But there was nothing, absolutely nothing taking place.
So, in South Africa, there's reports that people are being raised from the dead. Crazy things like that. We're not there to obviously see it, but these reports are taking place. So what do you think, what was driving the reports? Because I'm curious who's driving these reports that make them come across as though things are happening when they're not.
I know, but these things are always happening, happening over there. They're never happening here.
Right.
It's always it's like in the Bible, all these great miracles of the past, the parting of the Red Sea and Jesus walking on water, it all happened way back there, so you can't test it. And all the future glory stuff, it's way up there in the future. You can't test that.
Right.
And there's nothing going on now,
Right. No, and I agree. And so the interesting thing is the whole Bible is based on what Christians would like to call testimony.
Yeah.
And that's how we have to believe that it's true, because of the testimony of the witnesses that then recorded it or whatever. But much the same way, all these healings and things that people are happening in the raisings of the dead, it's all based on testimonies. And we have to just trust the testimonies that look at all these things that are happening over there. Right.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it makes me wonder, are there real testimonies, or are people manipulating something behind the scenes? Because that's just weird. Who would testify to that? Yeah,
I mean, I think you're just outright lying.
That's what I think too.
I just think they're outright lying,
Yeah. Or they're deceived too, because they're so emotionally connected
Yeah.
to what's going on, because that's possible too. It's like
Yeah.
if you're in a room and everybody's all happy and joyous and singing, and somebody turns and says, "This is the Holy Spirit," all right, well,
Yeah.
then you're
Yeah.
inclined to think it's the Holy Spirit because
Yeah.
that's what you call it. So that may be the same type of thing too. There's a lot of hysteria going on, and so you just look. That person was raised from the dead. Oh yeah, he was raised from the dead. You just believe whatever you're told.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
I didn't mean to pause you on that. I was just curious about that because you're a firsthand observer of that, so that's kind of
Yeah.
cool.
Well, in one big healing service, there was this visiting pastor from America, and he had this great healing ministry. Well, during the church service, I mean, this is thousands of people there. And where I was sitting, not far from me, a man had a serious heart attack. And they called for the ambulance. And I thought, well, why doesn't this pastor come down
Right.
and lay hands on him? Like,
Right.
he didn't even try to come down. And he was aware of what was going on because everything came to a stop, So
Right.
he knew what was going on, but he didn't dare go down. And
Well, it's because it wasn't on his agenda. It
That's
didn't hit his
right.
list that he had of people to heal that day.
Yeah, yeah. So then when that laughing revival, the Toronto blessing hit. Remember that?
Yes, everybody's going all hysterical and stuff, and yeah, falling
That
out of the seats. And
I was in church one night and it just erupted all of a sudden. And you think, and there were people doing all this weird acrobatic stuff and as usual, nothing ever happened to me. And what used to frustrate me, like nothing. I could never get slain in the spirit. I could speak in tongues only because I could put it on. I mean, I knew that. But nothing ever happened to me. It happened to everyone else around me. People were, during this, laughing revival, people were doing all the hysterics and laughing and rolling. But me, nothing.
Nigel, would you say that maybe it's because you just didn't have enough faith?
No doubt, no doubt. But I used to pray. I mean, look, my first experience coming out of 7-day Adventism into the Independent Baptists and that, and I was going to Independent Baptist Church Sunday mornings, and this little Assembly of God church, not the main one, of a Sunday night. And the contrast was really big. The Independent Baptists are all serious, all conservative, the hymns, and the Pentecostals are very happy, clappy, and stuff like that. And anyway, the pastor there one night wanted to ask people to come up for prayer for something or other. So I went forward. So we're all lined up, mainly men. And he goes to the first man and he says, "Can you speak in tongues?" And I thought, "Oh, here goes," So anyway. So he's laying hands on everyone. They're falling over, they're babbling away in tongues. And it's my turn. And I'm right at the end of the line. He comes up to me, "Do you speak in tongues?" "No." "Would you like to?" Well, And this was, to me, this is brand new, right? Raising my hands.
I don't know, do I?
And start raising my hands because I was very conservative, but to raise my hands and go, "Oh, Jesus." Anyway, so I'm very awkward. So he's laying hands and he's trying to push me over, and I would not go over. I resisted it, But I was silently praying. I said, "Lord, if this is of you, like in the book of Acts, I mean, like they weren't expecting it. That's what I want. But if it's not of you, I don't want it, like protect me," that sort of stock standard protection prayer. And so he's trying to get me to speak in tongues. He's trying to push me over, and I would not go over. Anyway, he dismissed everyone, and I started walking off, and he said, "Not you." So he made me stay. So all these other men from the congregation came around me. And it was like I was an Indian. I was an Indian totem pole. They were all going around me with their hands out. And this pastor's trying to push me over. And this goes on maybe for 10 minutes. And so I'm trying to speak in tongues, but nothing's coming out. And he got so frustrated with me. He said, "Oh, go and sit down." He says, "Next time I'm here, you'll be speaking in tongues." So that was my introduction into the being baptized in the Holy Spirit.
Wow. 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 What a story. That's nuts.
Yeah. So I was literally the last man standing because all the others went. They got slain in the Spirit, but not
You
me.
really have to be. You really have to be in a mindset
You do.
of joining everybody else in their hysteria. That's really what it is.
Yeah.
And if you're not there, and if you're not willing to, just watch everybody and follow the lead,
Yeah.
you're going to end up doing what you did. Wow.
Yeah.
That's a cool story. All right.
Yeah.
So that didn't take then.
That didn't take. So I wasn't looking to find fault with the say the Pentecostal doctrine, because I believe that those gifts were still for today.
Okay.
And so I was actually praying about this. I was asking, well, Lord, what's going on here? And I just want to know, blah, blah. So I was in a Christian bookshop, like in our capital city here in Adelaide. And I was just looking through the book, seeing what there was, anything about the charismatic thing and that. And I'd never heard of John MacArthur up to that stage. And there was a lone book there, or single book on its own, called Charismatic Chaos. And I thought, this looks interesting. So I pulled it out. So I took it to the counter, and the woman said, oh, someone ordered that book. They didn't stock it normally and didn't pick it up. So they put it in the shelf. Well, it was, that was a divine appointment, sort of. So I read that book, and it just bowled me over. It was thought, wow, the way John MacArthur explained, the gifts and, that they weren't for today sort of thing. So I became a real John MacArthur fan. So I started consuming John MacArthur books and stuff like that, and started becoming more, not Calvinistic. That was another chapter that was yet to come. But I was sort of in that sort of mindset there, in that sort of the John MacArthur camp, that sort of thing. So where do we go from here? So when my marriage ended in 1989, my life went to absolute shit from then, even though I was attending church still, until about 2002. I had 2 more marriages in that time. Second one was just a rebound thing. Third one was a stupid mistake.
So did I hear you say 1998 to 2002? So
1989 is when my
89.
first marriage.
Okay, sorry. I thought you said 90. Gotcha, 89. Okay.
Yeah, 89.
Got it.
And that's a whole other ball game. What was going on? During that period. What had happened in my first marriage to bring it to an end? I mean, that's a story in itself. I spent all those years up until 2002. I was so angry on what she did to me, and to the children too, But that's just, I was angry. I was drinking heavily for one, I suppose a fair period of time. Still going to church and all of that. But anyway, into the end of my third marriage, that was it. I just had enough of women, had enough of life. That was it, So it's like, you'd understand this having been a Christian. Were you on the sort of Calvinistic reform side of?
I was, yes.
Yeah. So I was eventually, and so you would understand this. So around about 2002-ish, end of that, 2003 maybe, I was coming under this great conviction that I was really living in a really bad way, and it's like God was granting me repentance, but it's like a surfer out on a surfboard waiting for a wave. And when a wave comes, you think, no, I'm not going to catch that one. And so I kept on resisting this conviction I had. No. And this happened 2 or 3 times over a period of time, but because I didn't want to give up the way I was living. I loved wine, women, and song, and I didn't want to stop that. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't want to give up that lifestyle. Finally, this wave came in, and I thought, no, I'm going to catch this one. And I rode it all the way into the shore, and it's like God had granted me repentance, and my whole life just changed. It just flipped around. And I decided there and then, look, if I'm going to be a Christian, I'm going to be one all the way, boots and all. And that's what that's what I did. And I had bucket loads of repenting to do, believe me, the way I've been living. But it's so 2005, I was on this Christian dating site, and there was this woman in another state up in Queensland, and about 2,000 kilometres away. And she'd noticed some stuff that I'd been posting on this Christian singles site. There's a chat room there where people could have chats about theology and doctrine and stuff like that. And she was noticing some of the things that I was posting there. And so she thought, who is this man, like, sort of thing. She was interested. So she got in touch with me. And anyway, we got chatting. So very, very long story short, I flew up there to meet her. In the end, I sold my house, moved up there, and we got married. We got married in 2006. So that's wife number 4. We were going, just trying to think. Yeah, we were going just to a regular Baptist church at that stage. And it was very sort of wishy-washy, and I was sort of, I don't think we can stay here, sort of thing, It was just very, very wishy-washy, limp-wristed, and not too exciting. So anyway, somewhere up the track in those years, we became friends with this couple that were Calvinists. Now, he was a real 5-point Calvinist, and I was a 5-point Arminian. And
you tell me, after all these years of reading MacArthur, you were still a 5-point Arminian? How did that happen? Did you actually read his stuff?
yeah, I did.
Good Lord, man, because he's a staunch Calvinist. So
yeah, I know.
Even though I think he contradicts dispensationalism, so it's weird that he's a dispensationalist too. But anyway.
I think that's I think his dispensationalism sort of influenced me.
I got you. I can see that. Yeah, because
I think more than his Calvinism. Yeah,
they were definitely inconsistent with each other. So so you got to fall one way or the other. You felt dispensational. Got it. Makes sense.
So these friends of ours said he was a 5-point Calvinist, and we had never argued, a lot of real intense discussions, hours upon end. So in the end, I decided to check out this Calvinism to gather a bit of ammunition to use, sort of, to get a good argument. So I went looking for the best of the best with the Calvinists, and who do I read? And I came across these DVD series by John Piper called Tulip. So I sat down and watched them.
What was it called?
They were called Tulip. Tulip, Tulip.
Oh, Tulip. I thought you were saying Cheer Up. I was like, Cheer Up? I don't know any Cheer Up by John Piper. Tulip. Got it.
Tulip.
That's Australia, baby. Come on, man. Bring it.
Bloody Americans, I tell you what. Need to learn to talk proper English.
The old John Piper series called Cheer Up.
That's it. Tulip. That's it. You got
it. Love John Piper, by the way. He was probably my favorite author, preacher, whatever, when I was a Christian. I ate everything he wrote and said and preached. Like, if there's something he did, I know about it. I love that guy. Yeah.
Well, this teaching on Tulip.
Got it. Not Cheer Up, but Tulip. Got it.
That's it. Yeah, Tulip. Yeah. He was so methodical with it, as he is. And I thought, wow, yes, because I've seen these things in the scriptures. Obviously, you're chosen, elect, predestination, but you sort of But anyway, and so he convinced my wife and I to become Calvinists, which we did. So we started attending a Reformed Baptist church up in Brisbane, up where we were living, which at the time was the headquarters for the John MacArthur Ministries, like in Australia. So that was operating out of there. So during that time we were at that church, one Sunday morning, one of the deacons approached me, and he was like a cage stage Calvinist, but he was a cage stage partial preterist. He was so excited to tell me that he and another fellow deacon.
So just pause for a second, because I know what you mean by a cage stage, but why don't you just elaborate, because I don't know if our listeners know what cage stage means.
Well, cage stage means when you become a Calvinist, someone should lock you away for a period, because that's all you talk about.
You feel the need to save everybody.
Save everybody. Lock that man up, Yep. Throw away the key.
Yep, absolutely. And funny thing is, so the whole thing we ran into earlier, tulip versus cheer up or whatever, it wouldn't have surprised me if Piper wrote a book called Cheer Up, or a series, because he's all about Christian hedonism, the whole cheery, happy thing. So Cheer Up would have worked, but I was shocked. I was like, he did something called Cheer Up. I never heard that. So that's pretty funny too. But yes, I was also a Christian hedonist caged rat that I needed to stick around for a while. But yeah, I did the same thing with that and with Tulip. I remember those days. Anyway, yeah, sorry. So that clarifies that, so listeners know what you mean by that. But go ahead, keep going. You were one of those. Got it. Oh no, He was one of those. The guy you're talking to.
Yeah. So he was a cage stage partial preterist.
Cage stage. I love it.
And I'd heard of preterism from Dave Hunt, Dave Hunt many years ago. And all I knew about preterism is what Sam Frost calls it, a damnable heresy. And it was like, and that's all I knew about it. It was a heresy. And so he's now telling me this stuff, and I've got a smile on my face, and I'm thinking rubbish, bullshit, heresy. And anyway, on the way home from church in the car, I'm saying to my wife, well, hey, guess what? Blah, blah, blah. And to make matters worse, these two deacons, so the senior pastors know about the change in the eschatology with these two men, and they're home fellowship leaders. Like, how could they allow them to be home fellowship leaders if they're into all this heretical stuff,
Now, were they partial or were they full, these two guys?
Partial.
Okay, well, that's why. Yeah, of course. That's an acceptable. Sure.
Yeah. Well, just as an aside to that, I don't know when it was, a couple of years ago, maybe, I was attending a Reformed Baptist church here in Adelaide. And I was talking to the pastor, and I mentioned to him that I was a preterist, and he says, as long as you're not a full preterist, he said, because that's heretical.
Right.
But I just kept my mouth shut anyway. It wasn't worth the angst. So anyway, after we got home from church, got out the laptop, got online, put in preterism, and I thought, I'm going to have a look at this and see what it's all about. And as it would have it, Gary DeMar came up. First thing came up in this book, Last Days Madness. And there was this DVD series called Understanding Bible Prophecy. So I ordered the book and ordered the DVD series. So when the DVDs arrived a couple of weeks later, I sat down and I binge watched them. And I thought, wow. With Calvinism, I'll get back to that. Calvinism answered a lot of that hard stuff, that yucky stuff that's in the Old Testament. Because what I loved about Calvinism was the absolute sovereignty of God, that God's completely in control, And so Calvinism helped me to understand a lot of difficult things in the scriptures, because, the answer to it is the sovereignty of God. Well, when I heard Gary DeMar go through, he was teaching like partial preterism, but that answered the things I'd been seeing for decades, like this generation and all the near, soon, shortly, all that stuff I'd seen and didn't know what to do with. And so he successfully answered all those things I had seen, and I just latched onto it, and I thought, yeah, this is it. This is it. And so back in that time, I was so I was buying a lot of other Gary DeMar books and books he was recommending, you know, books by Ken Gentry and stuff like that. And I was consuming all of this material, but I was listening to Don Preston, his morning musings, which was I think 2013. I started listening to him, and I was listening to Ed Stevens too, because I actually bought some DVDs of some preterist conference back in that era.
Yep.
And so you had anyway. So listen to Ed Stevens talking about the rapture and all that sort of stuff and blah blah blah. And Don Preston took issue with that, and he has a very different take on 1 Thessalonians chapter 4.
Right.
And I thought that's odd. I mean, I was agreeing with Ed Stevens because that's what the text says. So, but I was curious to know why Don Preston held that view. So he was advertising a book, We Shall Meet Him in the Air. So I ordered that, and I read about 20 or so pages of it, and I just thought, this is rubbish. He was talking about the death of Adam. I think that's what he was talking about. The initial. I thought, this is just rubbish, and I thought it really got up my nose, you know. So, I'm sorry, Don Preston gets up my nose to this very day.
That's funny. And it's hilarious because you and I have very similar stories in our approach to this moment. And you went this way, and I went this way. I totally was the Don Preston fan, and you apparently were the Stevens fan. That's so funny. Not that I disliked either of them. I was friends with both, but I definitely agreed with Don more theologically. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. It's either one or the other. You can't.
There's no merger.
No, you can't.
You can't have a rapture and not a rapture at the same time. Yeah.
No. Anyway,
but you know, your overall preterist view is what's going to filter your interpretation of that text. I was a corporate body view from all the other passages, so I had to force the interpretation there, like Preston does. But anyway, so Stevens uses that one, and then I think forces other ones to fit that. So either way, they're both flawed. But we'll get there. Keep going.
So I looked at both. I looked at both of their views, and at the same time, I was watching those Gary DeMar DVDs, watching them over and over again. And I noticed that Gary DeMar was being inconsistent because he was still trying to hang on to a yet future second coming.
Right.
And the passages he was referring to that, I thought that's got nothing to do with the future second coming. That fits into all the other verses you're using to show that he returned in 70 AD. And I kind of suspected that Gary DeMar, being who he was, would wind up where he is now. Though he hasn't come out and outright said it. I mean, he is now a full preterist.
I mean, he just spoke at David Curtis's conference. So, I mean, that's pretty much confession, I think, right there. But who knows, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. So, me being me, I sort of pushed full preterism to its logical end. At the same time in this period, I'm reading Bart Ehrman's books. And I've been warned off Bart Ehrman. Don't read him, you'll lose your faith and blah, blah, blah. But I was starting to read Bart Ehrman. I think it was Jesus Interrupted? Where he talks about Jesus being a failed apocalyptic prophet. Like he didn't show up. That's what he said. He just failed to show up. And I was looking, so I was reading Bart Ehrman, really heavily impacted by what he was presenting. And I think I've read almost every sort of trade book and a couple of his scholarly works that he's published. And I was listening to Ed Stevens, and because Ed Stevens makes much of, and I think rightfully so, about all these expectation statements. What were those first century saints expecting? Now, this is assuming all the words recorded in the Gospels were what Jesus actually said. So I'm just, I don't believe they are now, but assuming that that's what Jesus said, is that the second coming was going to be visible. Every eye would see him. It'd be loud. It'd be noisy. And yet, according to Ed Stevens, you have invisible spirits coming out of the invisible Sheol Hades realm, being caught up invisibly into an invisible sky, together with the invisible living saints who now have been transformed in a moment, twinkling of an eye. So they're caught up to an invisible Jesus and taken up to an invisible heaven up there somewhere, but nobody saw it. I thought there's no evidence for it. Despite what Josephus said that he saw, and he claims others saw, but Josephus never claims he saw Jesus or anything like that. And it really hit me that nothing actually happened. He didn't come back like he said he would. Nothing happened. So you've got Don Preston, as of his recent debate with Richard Carrier, the evidence that something had happened, that people started dancing in the streets, like, woohoo, the new covenant's here, sort of thing.
Right.
Or you've got on the Ed Stevens side, it's all in the invisible realm. And so nothing, but it really hit me that nothing happened, that Jesus, there's not a single verse or passage in the New Testament that puts the second coming anywhere in the future. It had a first century use by date, and it didn't happen.
Yep.
Going back before that, I had gone from being dispensational premill to embracing postmillennialism. And I remember being first exposed to postmillennialism and to amillennialism, where Jesus is currently reigning over all the kings of the earth and everything. And I was thinking, just the way the world is, the state of the world. And I said, I thought to myself, he's not doing a very good job. That was sort of,
right.
That was one of the things going on in my mind too at that time. And he's still not doing a very good job,
No, it's all strictly, as my friend Dustin likes to term it, sophistry. It's all rooted in theological concepts, but nothing rooted in reality. Like, there is no substance to any of these art. In any other world outside of the Bible, you would say, no, this is definitely not reality, because if this God was in fact ruling, everything would be a lot different than it looks. But when it comes to God and Christianity, well, we just have to trust God. It literally always comes back to we just trust God. He's doing the good thing, always doing the good thing. Does this look like the good thing? Well, no, but I just trust God. Why do you trust God? Well, because he's God. It's just like this circular reasoning. There's never any accountability for God. No. You have nothing to put your finger down where you can say, I think this God is not really doing what God should do, at least what he says he was going to do. But we just circle back. Well, when we don't know, well, we just go back to trusting God. It's like mindless robots just believing. Yeah, and the very few who are willing to keep studying themselves out of this and let the question stand and say, I'm not going to circle back this time. I'm going to hold God accountable, and he's not doing what he said he was going to do. This is a failed prophecy, and that's why you and I ended up out ultimately, because it just doesn't work. No. But keep going, man, because I just it's frustrating. And I ended up a post-millennialist at some point too, before preterism. So I understand all of where you're at, man.
And as a partial preterist, you can't blame the devil for the state of the world, because according to them, Satan's been dispensed with. So, he's
right. This is all Jesus. Right, exactly. Satan's gone. Yeah. He's restrained right now for 1,000 years, which is the golden age. 1,000 being metaphoric, not literal. But for as long as Jesus chooses not to come back, this is all the 1,000-year reign, and he's in charge, and there's no Satan. No. My goodness, you might as well call him Satan, because I think Satan would do a better job.
Oh, I think he would.
I don't think he can mess things up any worse than Jesus has. Honestly,
no,
so bad.
So that was 2013, 2014. I was looking at all. So I hadn't embraced full preterism, but I suppose I came to that conclusion. It had to be full preterism. But Jesus, as Bart Ehrman said, failed to show up. And there's no evidence that nobody saw him come. I mean, according to the New Testament, I said, every eye will see him. But you got, like Ken Gentry said that, Revelation 1:7, every eye will see him. Or see just means like understand, not literally see with your eyes, like, see, understand, but that doesn't work. And I thought, this visible, noisy, earth-shaking event just didn't happen. And just like the resurrection, nobody witnessed it. And that's another thing during the years. I'd hear pastors say, I think parroting Gary Habermas or whatever, saying that the resurrection of Jesus is the most provable event in history. And I used to think, how? No one saw it. Nobody witnessed it. How can you? 2,000 years up the road, we weren't there. I mean, how can you prove it?
I know. You can't. It's all here. It's just like the healing things you went to. If you're convinced that what everybody else is experiencing is what they're saying it is, you just continue to regurgitate the same exact answer. And I think that's what Christians have fallen into. It's brainwashing mentality. Like, Jesus resurrected. Everybody says there's proof for it. Oh, there must be proof for it. So you just regurgitate the same thing. No, there's proof for it. And yet, if you ask them and you press them and you say, why don't you give me some proof for it? Well, I can't do that. I'm not going to do that. You can't tell me it's not true because you can't prove it didn't happen. That's like,
I know.
Seriously? That's where you're going to go with this? It's just so crazy, dude. And you and I were both in it. Anyway, I keep sidetracking you, but I just like these moments reminisce with me because I was there. I remember them so vividly.
But the thing is, people who make these claims, the onus is on them to prove it. Like if I said, you look, Alan, I could climb up the top of the Empire State Building, I could jump off and I could fly. You wouldn't have to give me arguments that I couldn't do it. You said, okay, then up you go. I would have to prove to you that I could do it.
Right. But typically what the Christian does with this information is they say, oh yeah, well, prove that I can't do it without me doing it. That's literally what they're saying. Prove I can't do it without me doing it.
Yeah.
How am I going to do that? I don't even know what you're asking me to do. Like you're asking me to defy a claim without any evidence that it actually is a claim to begin with. Like, it's frustrating, dude.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, back to 2014.
Yeah.
So there was this image or photo I'd seen on the internet for about a year, and it was a woman living in a particular country that was about to be stoned to death for committing adultery. And as it was, she's sort of buried up to here. And it was the look on her face that haunted me, her eyes. It was like there was no plea for help or mercy. It was a look of absolute hopelessness. And it just haunted me for about a year. And I remember this was the defining moment where I was sitting up with a computer and where I was living up in Brisbane. And this image came up again. And I looked at it. And I thought, you know what? Being the good Calvinist I was, all this thing, election predestination. I thought God has withheld from her the only message that she needs to be saved. So the moment the last rock has spilled her brains all over the ground, then the real horror begins because she goes to hell. I remember sitting and looking at the computer and I said, no, that is wrong. I was already having this struggle that I had figured I was more moral than God, that my ethics were better than God's. But this was a defining moment. I remember saying no. And I remember looking up and said, I do not believe in you anymore. Like F off. That's it. I was done. That was it. That was a defining moment. So with all this seeing that there was no second coming of Christ. It didn't happen, which meant the whole New Testament fell over. And the New Testament's built on the Old, so the Old just fell over too. And so, oh, you still there? Think of,
Yeah, I'm here, dude. Just keep going. Don't stop.
Okay.
Go on. I'm here. I'll come back in a second.
That's okay. Yeah, sure. And so that was a defining moment. And so I just walked away from everything. And I probably for 12 or 18 months, I became a really angry, card-carrying atheist. I was angry because I'd been so deceived all those years, and I believed a lie. And I made a lot of decisions in my life based upon my faith. And plus, I'd spent thousands and thousands of dollars on books and study materials and, all sorts of things. So, 12 or 18 months, I was a pretty angry, card-carrying atheist, And I actually became a very good apologist for atheism, which is something apparently not supposed to happen because atheists haven't got a leg to stand on, But anyway, I think probably after about 18 months, I settled down a bit, thinking about things, and I settled on becoming agnostic. So I became a very happy agnostic, and I was very happy being a happy agnostic, And it left me a great freedom just to think about all sorts of other things than that. And so anyway, there's a lot of stuff went on. So 2016, two years later, was the first, I suppose, attempt at returning to my faith. Some things were going on, and I was kind of, just rethinking things, and maybe I was wrong and blah, blah, blah. So I just kind of was moving towards returning to my faith. This 2016, it didn't last for long. It just didn't stick. I just couldn't make it stick. And so and all the same issues and problems were there. I thought, no, it's just bullshit. I can't. And
what was the catalyst to make you want to even attempt to return to your faith?
I think I remember this well. I was in my bedroom at the time. And so this was after my fourth marriage, and I haven't mentioned that yet. When I abandoned the faith, my wife abandoned the marriage. So, so that was marriage number 4, done and dusted. So 4 marriages, 4 divorces.
Yeah. So I think dating is where you're at. You should just stick to dating. It's a lot easier. You don't have to go through all the divorce courts. Just date, man.
And I'll tell you what, the amount of money you lose, man.
Yes. Dating will save you a ton of money and a ton of time.
Well, you'll be pleased to hear I've been on my own for the last 11 years, and I've had the odd lady friend here and there along the way. So
You think you figured it out? Awesome.
I have finally figured it out. And I will not go near a Christian woman again. I'll tell you what.
Holy crap, man! That's so funny.
Man alive. But yeah.
All right, so you're in your room, and what happened?
I was just thinking about things, and I was thinking about I've had a lot of bad stuff happen in my life. Anyway, and I was just thinking about all the times I'd actually cried out to God to sort of just looking for direction, for answers. And I remember, in my bedroom, and I just started praying. I said, listen, God, if you are there, and so, and I've prayed many prayers like that, just in case you are there. And I remember praying, the big sticking point with me was the failed return of Jesus. I said, I can't get around that. I can't, he didn't come back. So therefore, he's not who he said he was. He's not who the New Testament author said he was. He was simply someone who thought he was the Messiah, but He wasn't. A bit like A Life of Brian, with you ever seen the Messiah scene?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I'm not the Messiah.
Yeah.
John Cleese said,
Hey,
yes, you are.
I'm the
And I
Messiah
said,
will
no,
deny
I
his
followed
dignity.
you.
All right, I am the Messiah. He is the Messiah.
Oh.
That poor guy couldn't get out of it.
Yeah. And then he ends, I'm the Messiah. He said, F off, like.
That's a funny ass movie, man. Oh my God, it's so funny.
Yeah. Oh, that's classic.
Yeah, totally.
So I don't know, there were two. Anyway, after 2016.
Oh, by the way, before you keep going, in case you haven't gotten that far yet in my book, I actually literally quote that scene in my book.
Oh, okay, I haven't got that far
It's
yet.
in there. It's in there. You're going to crack up when you get to that point.
Oh, good. So 2016, I moved back from Queensland to Adelaide, so back to my home state, which is where I am now. And because I live with my son and his family, but in two separate houses. So we live on a 24-acre rural property with two separate houses on it. And so I was going to church with them for a little bit, and it just wouldn't stick. It just wouldn't. I just couldn't. And I think I made one. Yeah. So what happened in more recent times? I think in 2017 I was on YouTube, and Rabbi Tovia Singer.
The name, I'm not familiar with anything other than the name.
Probably one of the most well-known rabbis in the world. His mission is to bring back the Jews who've converted to Christianity, to bring them back to Judaism. So he set up a ministry called Jews for Judaism in opposition to Jews for Jesus, sort of thing,
Okay.
So he started talking about some things that really sparked my interest. Obviously, he was speaking, against the New Testament, against Jesus, and all this sort of stuff. But he just sparked my interest. And he was talking about, he said, the righteous Gentiles of the nations will have a share in the world to come. So there was no having to go through Jesus or some other intermediary in that. It's just, the righteous of the nations. So just living a good life, doing good work sort of thing, helping old ladies across the road will get you a share in the world to come. So that sparked my interest. So I listened to hours and hours and hours of this Rabbi Tovia Singer and other rabbis who are involved in that. So I started investigating, the Jewish road. And I thought, okay, this is interesting. So I spent, a ton of money on buying all these sort of Jewish commentaries and blah, 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 and going down that road. So I got to the point, I thought I was either going to convert to Orthodox Judaism or become a Noahide. And I thought, becoming a Noahide is actually, the better way to go. But after a while, the wheels started falling off that even. So it was just, and I thought, no, that doesn't work either, Oh. And plus, you still got the problem of Yahweh in the Old Testament, all these horrible things that he's commanded. And, and you've still got that problem. And those rabbis don't address those things. They don't go near them. They hone in on the passages like in, say, Isaiah, or say that verse that converted Spurgeon when he was a young man, where God said, come to me, all the ends of the earth, and be saved, and he says, no, I am God, besides me there is no God. And it's all lovey-dovey, and he just loves you so much, and he wants a relationship with you, but there's all that other stuff that's in there too,
Until you do one thing wrong, like hit a rock, and then he'll destroy you.
That's right.
He loves you as long as you do everything he tells you to do without questioning.
Yeah. That brings me back to the mid-90s. the first time I started seriously asking questions, like just thinking about things, about, this Jesus thing, it's not really fair, because what about everybody else? What about people who've never heard of Jesus? And it's the first time, and I'm thinking, that's not fair, it's not right. And I stopped myself straight up, because I was expecting a great big thunderbolt from the heavens to come and strike me, for daring to question God. Who are you, oh man, to answer back to God?
You're worried about that at this point, dude? That should have been your concern like 20 years earlier, bro.
Yeah.
What? Now you're suddenly worried about that?
Well, that was in the 90s, mid 90s.
Do you remember that dude who told you don't question because it's a sin? That should have been your first cue.
I know. But that was all feeding into what was eventually going to happen.
Yeah.
So where are we now? So I've been in this 11-year deconversion process from 2014 to now.
And back and forth, trying again and leaving again. So go back just a moment. Your first time with this lady being stoned video, whatever, that was the final straw for you the first time.
So that was 2014. Yeah.
Yeah. And you said you became an atheist apologist, so to speak. Like you're out.
Yep. I was out, completely out.
But you weren't completely out. You came back again. What made you come back again?
Addiction. This addiction.
I get you just couldn't let go of this possibility, right? There's got to be something there. Yeah, it's hard to break from. I get it. All right, so then you went back again and you said, "Yeah, Dan, I tried again and just didn't work a second time. Just doesn't work." And that's when you got sucked into the whole Israeli Jewish movement.
So I thought, okay, maybe, because a lot of the things this rabbi was saying made sense, and I thought, yeah, that's, I can sort of live with that. But there was none of this saved by grace, substitutionary atonement. I mean, it was, and like, you didn't need the blood of Jesus to forgive you for your sins. You could just repent and ask God to forgive you, and He would forgive you. So about, I don't know, what would it have been? 18 months ago, I suppose, ish, somewhere around about then, I was just watching YouTube, and this full preterist channel came up, and I forget what it was now. And there were some new faces on the block I hadn't seen before. So I just started watching them, and it just again tweaked my interest. And some of the things they were talking about, and I thought, I don't know, sort of, but anyway, I found myself being drawn back into it, back into full preterism. And I found myself back into it, boots and all. And I thought, this is it. This time it's going to stick, And I became heavily involved online. Like, I got into different Facebook groups. There was that Don Preston's group, which is about to do with doctrine. And I got out of there pretty quickly, like it was World War VII taking place. Man alive. It was a full-on, just everyone's at each other's throats. Yeah, you're all, you're wrong.
Everybody's wrong. I'm the only one that's right. I know Jesus. You got to learn my Jesus. The only reason ultimately that you and I ended up as atheists is because we didn't know that person's Jesus, or this person's Jesus, or that person's Jesus. It's always that answer. Well, you didn't know God the way I knew God. That's your problem. That's how you got. Everybody says that, and everybody's got a different freaking God, and it's so frustrating.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. But my whole experience with full preterism. Do you remember that Burroughs of Berea episode a while back where Rick was just bearing his heart about the whole mess in full preterism?
I don't remember.
He just laid it on the line. He said something that I never forgotten. And it's true. He said they are preterizing the whole Bible. And that's what they're doing. They're preterizing everything. It's just, and so I was listening to, some of the, big names within full preterism, and there's these new kids on the block. One in particular, I'm not going to mention, but this stuff that he just kept on sprouting, and people were just drinking it up. And I think, this is just rubbish. It's just so wrong, you know. And it was this whole shit show that was in full predator. Everyone's at each other's throats. I mean, you haven't just got, you know, Don Preston's side and the Ed Stevens side. You know, you've got these other groups, you know, the Universalists, the Israel Onlyists, and the whatever, you know. Yep. Everyone's at each other's throats.
Dude, and it has not even been that long that full preterism has become a giant system. Like, bro, I mean, we're talking just going back to the Cross and the Parousia, Max King, you know, that's really kind of what made it popular. And wow, we're talking, I don't know, what am I going to say, 50 years maybe or so? And it's already as splintered as it is. Oh my goodness. Like, this didn't solve anything. If anything, all it did was create more division in Christianity. It's like, it's all over the place.
Full preterism is the most splintered group I've ever come across.
It's nuts.
I mean, it's
for being such a small group of a belief system, it is more splintered, I think, like ratio-wise, than any other denomination or Christianity at full mainstream. Like, it's just nuts. It's so bad.
And it seems that no matter how off the beaten track someone's teaching is, like having been used to all that, you know, John MacArthur stuff and that, you're not afraid to name false teachers, you know. And it's like, there's no such thing as a false teacher in full preterism, except Mike Sullivan publicly slammed Ed Stevens, calling him a partial preterist false teacher. I mean, you know, he wasn't backward and forward in saying that publicly.
I have heard plenty of false teacher statements thrown around in full preterism. It's not uncommon at all. Each side has somebody declaring the other side a heretic. Like, it's...
Anyway, so I was venting my frustrations on Facebook about what I'm seeing in going on in full preterism. I'm really frustrated. So Sam Frost is a Facebook friend, so he was obviously seeing what I was putting. So he got in touch with me, and so we've had three 3-hour long video calls. And I mean, I don't agree with where Sam Frost has landed. I really don't. As far as full preterism goes, but because I fully accept the New Testament. If you just take it at face value, you end up with full preterism. Now, because of Sam Frost, I became aware of. I didn't know you. It was you and Tristan Gabriel. I'd never heard of you before, but in the course of conversation with Sam, he mentioned how you and Tristan had become atheists. You become full preterists, because he said a lot of full preterists become atheists. They mentioned you and Tristan. So I put your name and Tristan's name in that, and you came up, and there was your book. So I ordered your book, and then started listening to your shows here on YouTube. But it was Tristan Gabriel. When I heard him, he left full preterism for pretty much the same reason that I did, or left Christianity, but though mine was that woman about to be stoned to death. But he said the second coming of Jesus is a failed prophecy. It just never happened. Mm-hmm. And he was talking about the problem of evil in the world, like especially, you know, pedophilia and things like that, and human trafficking. And it's interesting. Sam Frost also, if Sam's listening to this, I mean, sorry, Sam, but you turned me into...
Don't worry.
Sam, you turned me into an atheist. He did.
Man, maybe I should have Sam on my show more often. He might help me.
He's the one that put me onto you, Tristan Gabriel. And it was Tristan Gabriel, what he was talking about. It just reignited a lot of stuff. Because years ago, I'd read that Bart Ehrman book, God's Problem. the thing of theodicy. If we got if God is, if we got a good God, how do you explain all the evil and suffering in the world? So because of Sam Frost, and Sam Frost also said to me about evil, but God will put everything right in the end. And I thought, no, that's bullshit. No. What about now? What about the horrors that are going on in the world right now? I mean, the horrors, I said, what about now? Why doesn't God step in and do something now? And so because of what Sam had said, I reread Bart Ehrman's book, God's Problem. And it's about that time, I think, I thought, nah, that's it. I'm done. I'm absolutely done. And like, I was listening to you, listening to others talking about, what's it on one of the YouTube channels? What's his name? Is it Justin? What's it called? The Deconversion Zone or something?
Deconversion Zone, Justin. Yeah. What
Yeah.
about him? Yeah.
I mean, he is brilliant the way he understands the scriptures.
Oh my
and
God, dude! I listen to him and I'm like, I thought I knew the Bible. Holy shit!
Yeah.
I mean, he's not a preterist, so I don't know how he got out before he. I mean, to me, it seemed like that would have been a good step for him, but fortunately, he is out because he's brilliant. But either way, he does know his Bible. Like, holy crap, he can quote any scripture anywhere. Guy's brilliant.
And so it was that process of all that messiness within preterism, talking to Sam Frost, which then he inadvertently put me onto you and Tristan Gabriel, because of what he had said about, well, God will put everything right in the end. And I objected to that. I picked up Bart Ehrman's book, God's Problem, and read that right through again. And I thought, no, I'm done. That's it. This is not a good God. I mean, if he does exist, he is evil. He is not a good God, you know?
No.
I want nothing to do with this God. It's just like...
Yeah, I mean, I'm at a point where even if I did become a theist again and believe he existed, I would still not at all worship him or bow down to him. He can do whatever he wants to me, but there's no way in hell I'm going to submit to that evil God. Not a chance.
No.
Not a chance.
But, you know, listening to Rick Welch today like that and other episodes with him, and like Rick's trying to reconcile this. It's funny, like he agrees with you about this horrible God of the Old Testament, but yet he's got the Jesus. But in many instances, Jesus is that evil God. If you like, he's the Lord of hosts, he's the angel of the Lord, and there are places he's the Yahweh. I mean, so, but like you may have seen on one thing today on one of my things, I think I'd put to Rick, was that what's it in Luke where Jesus says to bring my enemies before me, or bring them to me and slaughter them in front of me. I mean, you know, what's the difference between that and dashing the heads of babies against a rock?
I'm with you, man. I don't understand even the attempt to try to resolve this issue, because Jesus is Yahweh. So you got some people who are just ignoring the Old Testament now, saying, well, that I don't believe that anymore. Okay, so you're cutting out half of your Bible. That's deism, really. And you have others that are just trying to say, well, we don't read it that way. We reinterpret it in some other way. Okay, so you're not actually going to let the text speak for itself. You're just going to reinterpret it however you want. Yeah. I mean, that's just personalized promised Bible, basically. You know, and then trying to reconcile Jesus with the Old Testament God is just mind-blowing to me. I'm just like one of the things I didn't include in the book version you're reading, but will be in the second edition that I'm releasing soon under a new title. You know, you look at the Old Covenant text about Jesus, about God being a pedophile. Like, even if you just look at Ezekiel 16 and how he's talking about fondling the breasts of this, what would, for all intents and purposes, be about a 12 to 14-year-old girl in that culture. or telling them when they destroy this particular nation they're going in to destroy, kill all the men, women, and boys, but save the girls.
Yeah.
What do you think it is that he's wanting to save the girl?
Yeah.
What are the little girls going to do that the boys and women and men can't? Think
Yeah.
about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's just disgusting stuff. And even people like Rick see it and they're like, yeah, this is pedophilia. And I look at that and I'm like, okay, well, Jesus is Yahweh. And then he comes in the New Testament, he says, bring little children unto me. And I'm like, I see that in a whole new light now. And I'm like, this is the Yahweh that said, he adored the fondling the breasts of this 14-year-old girl. And you're going to tell him, you're going to send your little children to him?
Yeah.
No, thank you. Like, this stuff becomes very grotesque once you start to connect the pieces.
Yeah.
You don't want to do that when you're a Christian. You want to figure out a way to square it and isolate it. But if Jesus is Yahweh, you cannot deny that is a very awkward comment from Jesus.
Yeah.
If I'm a parent, I can't square that. I can't say, oh, children, just trust Jesus. He's wonderful. I can't anymore because he's Yahweh and he's a pedophile. Like, it's reality, man.
Yeah.
And I don't care how much people hate that I say that. If you're going to admit that Jesus is Yahweh, you cannot deny that fact.
Yeah.
It's sick, dude.
Yeah. And it's, and another thing too, I remember that book John MacArthur wrote called Slave, and where he shows that the word doulos in the New Testament, like in the Greek, it doesn't mean servant, it means slave. And when I read that book, did I buck up? I thought, I am not going to be the slave of Jesus. I'm not going to be his slave for eternity. No way.
Right.
No way.
And, we're told as atheists, well, you guys have no objective morality. You have no bearing on where you get your morality from. And I'm just like, you literally just submit mindlessly to a God's rules. You're his slave. You do what you're told. The minute God comes to you and says, I want you to dash babies' heads against rocks, are you going to obey him? If you say yes, you're a mindless robot and honestly should be arrested because you scare me and our society. But if you're going to question that and say, no, I couldn't do that, now you become a moral agent suddenly because you're denying a command by the God you say you're supposed to just obey.
Yeah.
Objective morality doesn't make sense. There's no such thing, really. It becomes objective only based on subjective morality, where we decide what we're willing to put up with. And I'm not willing to put up with a God like that. And I doubt any Christian would too if God came to them and actually commanded them to do this shit.
They wouldn't do it. Well, Rick said he wouldn't do it. Well,
Yeah. No, and we wouldn't. So how do we why are we spending so much effort trying to square this God with some good possibility? Like, I don't understand this other than one answer and one answer only. Brainwashing. That's it. It's the only explanation, bro. We're stuck because we're trapped in a mind prison that was placed upon us from birth.
Yeah.
It's so hard to get out of that unless you remove the brainwashing and then you see things clearly and you're like, bro, I'm out.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what finally you got to. But my question to you, because now that we're nearing the end here and we talked about how the easy way versus the hard way and how you've bounced back and forth, trying the addiction thing, right? You're still trying. Yeah. What makes this time different for you, Nigel? Why are you certain this time that you won't be drawn back in like you were the other 3 times?
In that last 11 years, excuse the language here. I could say, what's that term we got here in Australia? God fuck me dead. I could say that. I could not blaspheme the name of Jesus. I just couldn't do it. Now I can. I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem. It's like it's
okay.
I don't have a problem with it. I'm not. Hey, how's this? Speaking of the F word, when you're at a shopping centre as a Christian, you can't find a car park, and you ask God, and being all of a sudden a car park opens up, right? Oh, praise God, thank you, Jesus. A couple of weeks ago, I was in a car park at a shopping centre here, and no car park. And I said, for fuck's sake, give me a fucking car park. Guess what happened? Bing! One opened up. And I remember thinking, I said, if this was, I said, at the time I would have said, oh, praise God, thank you, Jesus. So what do I now? What do I say now? Thank fuck.
Thank fuck. Thank fuck. Why not?
But that literally happened the moment I said that. A car park opened up for me.
I'm now suddenly thinking of all the Christian songs I used to sing that I could replace God with the word fuck. And it would be really interesting if we were singing these songs. Oh my goodness, dude. It's just okay. This show just took a turn for the worse.
Anyway.
But I say it's a good ending, man. I love that. So that makes sense. All right. So you got to a point now where you don't even have a holy reverence for God.
Nothing.
Whereas the other 3 times, even though you left because it didn't make sense, something still held you there to that holy reverence. And this time it's gone.
It's like the first time in 2014, there was this cutoff point. There was a cutoff point here. I've got this 2-man or 2-person, whatever you call it, infrared sauna inside my house here. And I sit in there with this beautiful like meditation music on. I've got, I've got this beautiful, I've got this red light therapy. So the atmosphere is just charged, if you like. And I was just sitting in there and just pray. The last time I prayed, I sat in there and I poured my heart out to God. No tears flowing, and I had suspected for a fair while that I was just praying to myself. So in my prayers, I used to say, "Look, God, I'm praying to you. I know you're there. I'm not talking to myself." I was trying to convince myself I wasn't talking, but I sat in there and just poured out my guts to God. And it really hit me. I was praying to myself. God never, ever answers. He never says anything. It's just, and I realized I'm just praying to myself.
Mm-hmm.
That was it.
And in some ways, I can honestly say from my personal experience of escaping in that last moment, for me, it was prayer where I realized I was just talking to myself. There's the one part of me that just wept for a while because I was so sad to think about losing that friend that I thought I had all those years. Like it was very painful. But at the same time, I also felt this incredible bliss to realize all of this time, and here I am. I'm a survivor. I've pulled myself through some serious shit. I came back on top. I've started a whole new life. And I look at that and I say, I did that.
Yeah.
I did that shit, man. I don't need to give praise and honor to some other being that doesn't exist. I can be proud of myself.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. It's not a sin anymore to be proud of yourself and arrogant.
That's right.
Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, bro, I did that, man. You know what I mean? And it just built my confidence. Like, if I did that, I can do anything I want to do. I can do this. I can build my own life, and I don't need to consult with some invisible friend anymore because I was that invisible friend anyway.
Yeah.
I was literally just in touch with my own mind.
Yeah, I know.
Crazy, man. You see, I just cut out the middleman, basically, is all it is.
Yeah. Well, I haven't spent a moment of grief like Jesus and God was my best friend. But what I suppose am grieving about is these other beautiful friends I've got, like Spurgeon and Luther and Calvin, the Puritans. I mean, they were my friends. I've got so many of their books and stuff, and I'm going to miss them. I've got all these volumes of Puritan writings I haven't read yet, and I thought, Yep.
No, I hear you, man. I remember when we were when I was still having my church, Lift Church, I had a gigantic library, like huge, shelves upon shelves upon shelves. I was a massive reader, and all the same kind of guys you're talking about. And we were, because I was a church planter and because it was a preterist church on top of it, it was very, very hard to get that church stabilized in any sort of a location, because you were always bouncing around renting and trying to find a way to balance the size of the building with the size of the amount of people you have. And you start to grow and you become too big. And then you're like, oh, no, you can't fit anymore. So you're going to stifle your growth. So you have to move. And then you move to a bigger place, but it's too big. And then you start to shrink and you got to move back to small. So we were constantly moving. And it got to a point where I couldn't keep moving my books anymore. It was becoming insane.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of them at my house because I was just getting tired of moving them. But then I had my another library at my house. It was just too much. So I ended up having to just throw them away. Because I could have tried to sell them, but it was like, I was so exhausted. And there was so many books. I'm like, I'm not going to sit down and take a picture of every freaking book here and try to sell it on eBay or wherever. I didn't have that in me. I mean, talking thousands of books. You know what I mean? Like I can't.
Yeah.
So I just tossed them because I couldn't keep carrying them around.
Yeah.
I kept the ones that I still used on a regular basis, tossed the rest. And eventually, after my divorce, and trying to start my new life, I had literally a little Toyota to sell, stick shift. Basically, I had whatever I could fit in that vehicle, and that was it, because I was going to start a new life. So I donated every other book I could to whoever wanted it. We put it in a storage unit, and it was one of these storage wars type things. Somebody comes in and So I literally started over. No books at all. And man, that was so painful, dude. Like,
I know.
Like it just was ripping my heart out, because that was my treasure too, man. All these books that I had. And it was almost like, as hard as it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it was like if you have an arm that's got, is going to kill you unless you cut off, you just rip it off, man. You just got to rip off the Band-Aid or rip off the arm, and that's it. And it sucks, but you have your life,
I mean, these books are they're part of me. I mean, like,
Yeah. Well, get rid of them, man. And it will it's like ripping off that Band-Aid. It will be done. And then you won't have it anymore. You'll grieve it, but then you'll be done. At least you won't be continuing to attach yourself, not that you can't keep books. I mean, if that's what you want to do, keep them, but if they're holding you back from moving forward in your life free of Christianity, then by all means do what you got to do. But I mean, I cannot imagine the torture of knowing something's wrong and wishing you could be free, but still holding on and being attached to that addiction. Like I said, I mean, when I was a smoker who tried to quit, when I tried to quit the hard way instead of the easy way, I remember so many times where I would hate the idea that I want to smoke. I don't want to smoke. But then I miss it so much. I'm like, I got to do it. And I'd go back and then I'd start smoking. And like, it would be this moment of relief, but also I'd be so pissed off at myself, because I'd be like, what am I doing? I don't want to be doing this. I'm doing something I don't want to do, and yet I'm doing it. It's torture. It was absolute torture.
It's funny. I gave up smoking. I was a very heavy smoker. So, I'm 69 next month. So I gave up smoking when I was 39, and I was a very, very heavy smoker. I mean, I love to smoke. If I'd worn a nicotine patch, that wouldn't have worked. I just love smoking.
Agreed.
And I woke up one morning and thought, no, that's it. I didn't plan it. I just got out of bed and thought, no, that's it. Just stopped.
And that was it.
And yet with this.
That's so funny. Yeah. Well, whatever. Yeah. And so the same thing eventually happened to you. It just took you more withdrawal attempts. But it sounds like you're at a place where, irreverence is fine. And I think it's almost like cursing the cigarette now. I do the same thing. I'm like, with smoking, like every now and then you have this moment of what Alcoholics Anonymous calls romancing the drink, right? With alcohol. But same type of thing. Every now and then you have this like brief moment that pops up, and you're like, oh, I remember that feeling. I remember what it felt like to socialize, and you think about that, and you're like, oh, it'd be nice to have a cigarette. But then you're like, oh God, and all these other thoughts flood in, like, oh, it's all the cigarettes. Like you can't stop, and it's like you're constantly like having to go and spend all this money, and you're constantly in negative 30-degree weather out there trying to smoke a cigarette. Like this is like, and you realize how trapped you were and how awful it was, and it bound you so much.
Yeah,
it controlled your life, and it's I in my mind, it's the same thing that Christianity does to people. when they don't remove the brainwashing. So I am so glad to hear your story, because it does, in fact, demonstrate a parallel that I've been trying to draw. And I love that we did this, man. So I appreciate it so much.
Yeah, really. I appreciate it being on, being able to share. There's a lot more to it, but that's the condensed version.
Yeah, no, it was a good condensed version. But we are past an hour and a half mark, so we're going to head and cut it off for our viewers. I try to keep these shows limited as much as possible. But
yeah,
Nigel, it was awesome talking to you. I certainly look
too,
forward to further dialogue with you on a private basis. Stick around after the show, so we'll chat some more. Everybody else, thank you for being here. We appreciate it. And if you won't mind, drop me a little bit of support down there. You can join Patreon or just a one-time gift. It helps me continue to give shows like this going, so that you guys can enjoy people like Nigel and their stories. So we'll talk to you all soon on the next The Unraveler show.